Her kin called her worthless. The cowboy said she's more precious than gold. The sun had barely risen over the small town of Willow Creek when Lila stepped out of the narrow doorway of her family's weathered house. The wooden boards creaked under her feet as she walked down the familiar path that led to the small garden behind the house. Morning air was crisp, and dew still clung to the grass like tiny diamonds. Lila loved this quiet hour, a few precious moments where the world seemed still, and she could think without interruption. But those quiet moments were rare.
Inside her house, her family had already begun their usual routine of sharp words and constant criticism.
Her father, a stern man with a rough voice, would shake his head at her every move, muttering about how she was worthless and good for nothing. Her older brothers didn't speak much, but their disapproving stares cut deeper than any words could. Even her mother, who often tried to soften the harshness at home, seemed to sigh in resignation, as if Lila's presence reminded her of all the things that didn't fit into their perfect little family mold. Lila had long learned to move quietly, to make herself small so she wouldn't attract attention or invite more criticism. She had learned to speak only when spoken to, and to hide her thoughts behind a polite smile. But inside, she was a storm of ideas and dreams. She loved reading about faraway places, imagining herself walking through forests she had never seen, or standing on the edge of mountains that touched the sky. She dreamed of a life beyond the narrow streets of Willow Creek, a life where she would be valued for her kindness, her intelligence, and her courage. As she reached the garden, she knelt to tend the small patch of vegetables she was responsible for. Her hands were rough and calloused from work, but she found comfort in the soil. Planting seeds and watering them made her feel alive in a way her family's words never could. Each tiny sprout that pushed through the soil felt like a small victory, proof that something good could grow even in hard conditions. "Lila! Hurry up!" her father's voice bellowed from the porch. "He'll be late for chores, and don't think I'll cover for you." She stood quickly, brushing dirt from her hands, and made her way back to the house. Desk. Inside, the familiar scene awaited her. Her father sitting at the table, arms crossed, glaring. Her mother busy in the kitchen, pretending not to notice, and her brothers staring from the corner, silent but judgmental. "Don't forget the laundry," her father said. "And try not to break anything this time. You're clumsy enough as it is." "Bruh!" Lila nodded silently, her heart sinking. She wanted to speak, to tell him that she was capable, that she could do more than he thought. But the words caught in her throat. She had tried before, and it never ended well. Her father's scowl would deepen, her mother's sigh would grow heavier, and her brothers would roll their eyes as if she had embarrassed the entire family. Instead, she focused on her chores. She swept the floors, carried buckets of water, and scrubbed dishes until her hands ached. Every movement was mechanical, every step careful to avoid drawing more criticism. The words her family threw at her replayed in her mind like a broken record. Worthless, good for nothing, useless.
They stung, but Lila had grown used to the pain.
She had learned to survive it, to bury it deep inside where no one could reach it. Yet, despite the harshness of her home, Lila found small moments of beauty and hope in the world around her. She would pause sometimes to watch the birds that came to the garden, their bright feathers flashing in the sunlight. She would listen to the wind rustling through the trees and imagine it carried messages from distant lands. Lands where people were kind, and dreams were not ridiculed. These moments reminded her that the world was bigger than Willow Creek, and maybe one day she could find a place where she belonged.
Her favorite time of the day was early morning, before the town woke fully, when she could sit on the porch steps with her journal.
It was a small, leather-bound book, worn at the edges, filled with her thoughts, sketches, and stories. In it, she wrote about the life she wanted, the adventure she dreamed of, and the kind of person she hoped to become. Writing was her secret world, a place where no one could call her worthless, a place where her ideas mattered. One morning, as she scribbled in her journal, she noticed a small bird struggling in the garden, caught in a tangle of vines. Without thinking, she set aside her pen and carefully freed the bird, speaking softly to calm its frightened chirps. When it finally flew away, Lila felt a warmth in her chest, a small spark of pride. No one at home would have noticed or cared, but in that moment, she felt valuable. She realized that small acts of kindness and courage mattered, even if the people around her didn't see them. But her moments of peace were often interrupted by her family's judgment. One evening after returning from chores, her father scolded her for taking too long to help with the firewood.
"You're always wasting time," he barked. "If you can't even do the simplest things, what use are you?"
Her mother tried to soften the words, saying gently, "He doesn't mean it, Lila. Just keep trying." But Lila could see the weariness in her mother's eyes, the same weariness that seemed to follow her family wherever they went. Even the people who should love her without conditions seemed tired of her. Lila retreated to her room that night, closing the door quietly behind her. She sat on the floor with her journal and wrote furiously, pouring every hurt, every frustration, and every dream onto the pages. She wrote about the longing she felt for a life where she was seen, appreciated, and respected. She wrote about the unfairness of being judged for things she couldn't control and the quiet courage it took to keep going every day. Sometimes, she imagined a stranger coming into her life, someone who would see her for who she truly was, someone who would understand her kindness, her intelligence, and her courage. In her mind, this person was always calm, wise, and gentle, someone who could make her feel safe and valued without demanding anything in return. It was a comforting thought, though she knew it was only a dream. Days in Willow Creek were long and often monotonous. Lila walked through the town quietly, avoiding gossiping neighbors and curious children. She visited the market to fetch supplies, helped the elderly with small chores, and spent her afternoons reading or tending the garden. Though she was invisible to many, she left small ripples of goodness wherever she went, a helping hand here, a kind word there. One afternoon, as she returned from the market, a group of children ran past her, laughing and chasing each other. One of them tripped and scraped a knee. Without hesitation, Lila knelt beside the child, cleaned the wound, and applied a bandage. The child's mother approached, surprised and grateful. "Thank you, Lila," she said warmly. Lila smiled softly, feeling a quiet satisfaction. Moments like these reminded her that her worth was not defined by her family's harsh words, but by her actions and her heart. Yet, even as she found small victories, the weight of her family's judgment remained. Every sharp word, every dismissive glance, was a reminder that she was expected to shrink herself to fit into their narrow world.
And still, Lila refused to let their words break her completely.
She had dreams, and in her secret world of writing, reading, and small acts of kindness, she nurtured the hope that one day someone would see her for who she really was. And so, Lila's days continued, a careful balance of survival and quiet rebellion. She endured her family's scorn, but she also held on to small sparks of hope, moments of beauty, acts of kindness, and dreams that refused to die. Though the world told her she was worthless, Lila quietly believed that one day her worth would shine through, like a hidden treasure waiting to be discovered. Little did she know that day was closer than she imagined. The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when a new figure appeared on the dusty road leading into Willow Creek. The town was quiet, as usual, with only the soft chirping of birds and the distant lowing of cows breaking the silence. Wyatt, a tall and strong cowboy with a calm presence, rode slowly into town on his chestnut horse. His hat shaded his eyes, but his gaze was steady, and his boots, worn from years of travel, tapped lightly against the stirrups as he guided the horse along the uneven path. Wyatt wasn't from Willow Creek. In fact, he rarely stayed in one place for long. He had spent most of his life traveling across vast plains and rugged hills, tending cattle, helping ranchers, and learning to understand people as much as he understood the land. His reputation as a fair and kind man had spread across nearby towns, whispered by those who had met him, a man who saw the best in people and treated them with respect, no matter who they were. As he entered the town square, Wyatt noticed the simple charm of Willow Creek. The small wooden shops, the well-worn benches, and the dusty streets told the story of a town that had endured hardships but kept going. He dismounted near the general store, tying his horse to a post, and began to walk. His steps were calm, measured, each movement showing confidence, but not arrogance. He carried himself like a man who had seen much of the world and learned to value what really mattered: honesty, courage, and a kind heart. As he wandered through the town, his eyes fell on Lila, sitting quietly on the edge of her small garden behind the house where she lived. She was helping a little girl who had wandered too far from her mother. Lila knelt beside the child, gently guiding her back to safety, speaking softly to calm her tears. Wyatt watched for a moment, impressed by her calm and patient demeanor. "She's more precious than gold," he muttered under his breath, not caring if anyone overheard. It wasn't a boast or a careless comment. It was a truth he felt instinctively. There was something about the way Lila moved, the way she cared for others without expecting anything in return, that made her shine quietly in a world that often overlooked goodness. Lila, unaware of Wyatt's presence, finished helping the little girl and returned to her chores. She adjusted the small watering can in her hands and went about her work with quiet diligence. Her mind, however, was restless. She had grown used to being unnoticed, to fading into the background, and the idea of someone seeing her worth seemed almost unreal. Wyatt continued walking through the town, greeting the shopkeepers and townspeople with a polite nod. Many of them had heard of him already, some from travelers, some from letters sent between neighboring ranches, but for Willow Creek, he was a rare visitor, a stranger in a town that rarely welcomed outsiders.
Yet there was something about Wyatt that made people feel at ease.
His voice was calm, his words thoughtful, and he had the patience to listen without judgment. Later that day, Wyatt stopped at the market to buy supplies for the ranch he was visiting nearby. A market was bustling, small stalls crowded with vegetables, fabrics, and handmade goods. As he paid for some sacks of flour, he noticed a commotion near the edge of the market. A small cart had tipped over, spilling apples across the dusty ground, and the cart's owner, an elderly woman, was struggling to lift it back upright. Before anyone else could react, Lila stepped forward. With careful precision, she helped the woman right the cart, lifting with strength that seemed to surprise even herself. Wyatt watched from a distance, a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't just her strength, it was her confidence, the quiet courage to step forward when no one else did. He felt a respect for her that went beyond words, a recognition of someone who had value in every action she took. Later, Wyatt found himself speaking to the townspeople about Lila. "She's more precious than gold," he said casually, but with sincerity that left no room for doubt. The words spread quickly, as words about strangers often did in a small town. People murmured among themselves, curious, confused, and a little skeptical. Who was this young woman that a visiting cowboy claimed was so valuable? Meanwhile, Lila went about her day, unaware of the conversation she had sparked. She carried water to the garden, swept the front porch, and fed the small chickens clucking in the yard. Each movement was careful, practiced, and quiet. She liked to work with her hands. It made her feel useful, even if no one else seemed to notice. That evening, as the sun began to set and paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, Wyatt rode past the outskirts of town again. He noticed Lila sitting on the porch steps with her journal, writing softly under the fading light. He stopped his horse a few steps away, watching her for a moment, not wanting to startle her. There was a gentleness in the way she held the pen, a focus and intensity that spoke of dreams waiting to be realized. Finally, he spoke softly, careful not to frighten her. "Good evening," he said. Lila looked up, startled, her eyes wide. She had not expected anyone to speak to her, much less a stranger who seemed to carry calm authority in every movement. "Good evening," she replied cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't help but notice you helping that little girl earlier," Wyatt said. "You were very kind." "Not many people would take the time to do that." Lila felt a warmth in her chest at his words. She wasn't used to compliments, especially not sincere ones. Most people either ignored her or spoke sharply, but here was someone noticing her for who she truly was. "Thank you," she said softly. "I just wanted to help. That's what makes it valuable," Wyatt replied, tipping his hat slightly. "Kindness is rare. People like you. They don't go unnoticed by the right eyes." For the first time in a long while, Lila felt seen. Not just superficially, but in a way that touched something deep inside her. She nodded slowly, unsure how to respond, but something in Wyatt's calm presence encouraged her to believe in herself, even if just a little. Over the next few days, Wyatt remained in town, quietly observing and interacting with the townspeople. He visited the market, checked on the local ranch, and helped where he could without demanding attention. But he always found a moment to notice Lila, whether she was tending her garden, helping someone in need, or writing in her journal. Word of Wyatt's respect for Lila spread through the town. Some people were curious, others skeptical, but slowly, they began to see her differently. A shopkeeper would mention how helpful she had been. A neighbor would recall her kindness to a child, and even her family began to notice that she carried herself with quiet strength that could not be ignored. One afternoon, Lila found herself in a conversation with Wyatt while she carried a basket of fresh vegetables to the market. He asked her about her dreams, her thoughts, and what she enjoyed doing. For the first time, she spoke openly, without fear of judgment. She told him about her love for reading, her desire to see the world beyond Willow Creek, and the small joys she found in helping others. Wyatt listened intently, nodding and encouraging her without interrupting or dismissing her ideas.
"You have a strong heart, Lila," he said gently.
"Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. The world has a way of overlooking quiet people, but the right people, they see it." Her cheeks flushed, partly from surprise and partly from a strange newfound hope. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Not her family, not her neighbors, and certainly not anyone outside her little town. Wyatt's words were like sunlight breaking through clouds, warming a part of her that had grown cold from years of criticism. Days passed, and their friendship quietly grew. Lila began to look forward to seeing Wyatt in the mornings, not just for his compliments, but for the way he listened and respected her. He did not try to change her or push her beyond what she wanted. He simply reflected back the worth she had always carried inside, the worth her family had failed to recognize. Wyatt's presence also stirred something else in Lila, a sense of courage. She began to step out of her comfort zone, speaking up in small ways, helping more in the town, and trusting her instincts. The confidence she had hidden for so long began to grow, nurtured by someone who truly valued her as she was. By the end of that week, the town had changed, even if just slightly.
People whispered about Lila differently. They noticed her patience, her intelligence, and her kindness.
Wyatt's words, repeated quietly but with sincerity, had planted a seed that slowly began to grow, a seed of respect and recognition that no one could ignore. And Lila, sitting on her porch one evening, felt a new emotion stirring inside her. Hope. "Desk," She realized that the world might not always understand her, but there were those who could see her value. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that she might truly be more precious than gold. The town was alive with the usual sounds of roosters crowing, wheels creaking on old wooden streets, and the soft chatter of neighbors beginning their day. Lila woke early, as she always did, feeling a quiet sense of anticipation she had never felt before. Ever since Wyatt had arrived, something inside her had shifted. She still felt nervous around others, but there was a small spark of confidence that made her stand a little taller and move a little faster, as if the world might finally see her for who she truly was. Her first task that day was to fetch water from the well at the edge of town. The sun had just begun to peek over the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets. As she walked, she noticed that the town seemed slightly busier than usual. Merchants were setting up their stalls, children ran along the streets, and townspeople greeted one another warmly. But Lila's eyes were drawn to a small commotion near the town square. A cart carrying supplies had broken down, and the horses were restless. The merchant, an older man named Mr. Harlan, struggled to calm them as a crowd began to gather. Lila approached cautiously, unsure if she could help. But Wyatt, who was nearby checking on a neighboring ranch, gave her a reassuring nod. That small gesture was all she needed to gather her courage. "Here, let me help," she said softly, stepping forward. She approached the horses slowly, speaking gently to calm them, just as she had done with the little girl days before. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, and the horses began to settle under her care. With Wyatt's guidance, she helped secure the cart and made sure the supplies would reach the market safely. The crowd watched in silence, then slowly erupted into murmurs of admiration.
People began to realize that Lila was not clumsy or useless, as her family had always claimed.
She had skill, patience, and courage, qualities that could not be denied. And Wyatt, standing nearby with a calm smile, gave her a small nod of approval that made her heart swell with quiet pride. After the cart incident, Lila continued with her daily chores, but she felt different. The small victories of the morning had filled her with a sense of strength she had not felt before. Purpose. Feeding the chickens, tending the garden, and collecting firewood for her family. Even the mundane tasks felt important now, because she knew that she was capable of more than her family had ever given her credit for. Later in the afternoon, another challenge presented itself. A sudden storm rolled in from the hills, dark clouds covering the sky and strong winds whipping through the town. The town's small river began to swell, and a few homes near its banks were in danger of flooding. Lila noticed Mrs. Grant, an elderly widow struggling to move sandbags to protect her small house. Without hesitation, she ran to help, lifting bags, organizing neighbors, and giving clear instructions. Wyatt arrived just in time to see her in action. He watched as Lila coordinated the efforts, her voice calm yet commanding, her eyes focused and determined. He could see the strength she had carried all along, hidden beneath years of doubt and criticism. "You're amazing," he said quietly to himself, knowing that Lila would hear nothing, yet feeling the truth of it deeply. By the time the storm passed, the town was safe, and many of the residents had come to appreciate Lila's courage and quick thinking. But, at least silently, that she had done something remarkable. It was a small step, but for Lila it felt like a giant leap towards self-worth. That evening, after the storm, Lila returned to her home, exhausted but filled with a sense of accomplishment. Wyatt found her sitting on the porch steps, looking at the dark clouds still lingering on the horizon. He handed her a cup of water and sat beside her quietly. "You handled that storm very well," Wyatt said, his voice calm and encouraging. "Most people would have panicked, but you stayed calm and helped others. That shows strength, courage, and wisdom." Lila smiled softly, feeling her cheeks warm. She had never received such genuine praise before. "Thank you," she said quietly.
I just tried to help. That's exactly why it matters, Wyatt replied.
Helping others without expecting anything in return. That is true value. People like you, they shine quietly, and the right people notice it.
Lila felt a new kind of hope blooming inside her. For the first time, she realized that her worth was not defined by her family's harsh words or the small-minded opinions of the town. Her actions, her kindness, and her courage were what made her valuable. And Wyatt's words were a mirror, reflecting that worth back to her in a way that made her believe it might be real. The next few days brought more challenges, each giving Lila a chance to grow. She helped repair a broken fence on the edge of town, guided a lost traveler safely back to the main road, and even helped organize the town's small school library, sorting books and teaching children to read. With each task, her confidence grew, and the townspeople began to see her differently. They whispered about her quietly, amazed by her abilities and her calm determination. Her family, however, was slower to change. Her father still scowled when she completed chores without complaint, and her brothers still gave her sidelong glances that spoke of skepticism. But even they could not ignore the quiet admiration others had for her. And slowly, even her mother began to see that Lila was not the weak and worthless girl they had always thought she was. One afternoon, Wyatt invited Lila to help him at the ranch he was visiting nearby. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she was capable of more than her usual tasks. But Wyatt's calm encouragement gave her courage. "I think you'll do just fine," he said.
I want you to see what you're truly capable of. At the ranch, Lila faced challenges she had never imagined. She helped herd cattle across uneven ground, repaired broken fences, and even learned to saddle and guide a horse.
Each task was difficult, but she discovered a strength inside her that she had never known existed. Wyatt stayed by her side, offering guidance without taking over, letting her learn through action while providing gentle encouragement. By the end of the day, Lila was exhausted but exhilarated. She realized that the world was larger and more complex than Willow Creek, and that she was capable of navigating it. She had skills, courage, and determination, qualities that could take her far if she chose to believe in herself. Wyatt smiled at her as they watched the sun set over the ranch.
You did very well today, he said. I hope you see what I see in you.
Lila looked at him, a mix of surprise and gratitude in her eyes.
I think I'm starting to, she admitted. It's just the beginning, Wyatt replied.
You have more strength and value than you realize. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. In the days that followed, Lila began to apply her newfound confidence in Willow Creek.
She spoke more openly, helped others more freely, and began to trust her instincts.
Small victories accumulated, from assisting neighbors in need to standing up for herself in small disagreements.
Each time, Wyatt's quiet support reminded her that her worth was real, and that she could trust herself to navigate life with courage and kindness. The town began to change its view of Lila. People who once ignored or dismissed her began to ask for her help and advice. Children looked up to her. Neighbors respected her, and even her family, though slow to admit it, began to see that she was no longer the timid, overlooked girl they had always treated as worthless. Through every trial, every challenge, and every small victory, Lila's confidence grew. She learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She realized that her value was not determined by others, but by her actions, her heart, and the way she treated the world around her. And through it all, Wyatt remained a steady presence, not as someone who saved her, but as someone who reflected her worth back to her, encouraging her to believe in herself. His belief in her sparked a quiet revolution within Lila's heart, one that would continue to grow and shape her journey in ways she had never imagined. By the time the sun set over Willow Creek, Lila stood on her porch once more, watching the horizon with a sense of pride and hope. She had faced challenges, proven her abilities, and discovered strength she never knew she had. And she knew that with courage, kindness, and belief in herself, she could face whatever the future held. The morning in Willow Creek began like any other, with the sun climbing slowly over the small town, but for Lila, everything felt different. The air seemed lighter, the streets brighter, and even the simplest chores carried a sense of purpose she had never felt before. She had learned, through Wyatt's quiet guidance and the challenges she had faced, that her worth was real, that she was capable, and that she deserved respect and recognition. Her family watched her differently now, though they did not fully understand why. Her father's sharp eyes softened slightly whenever she completed a task efficiently. Her brothers, once skeptical and dismissive, occasionally nodded in acknowledgement when she spoke or acted with confidence. Even her mother's sighs had changed. They now carried a mixture of relief and quiet admiration. Lila's day began with tending to the small garden behind her house, her favorite place in Willow Creek. She knelt among the plants, carefully watering each sprout and examining the leaves for signs of growth. Each plant reminded her of herself, something fragile that could flourish with care, attention, and patience. Unlike before, she now saw herself as someone who could grow, someone whose value could not be diminished by words or judgment. Wyatt arrived soon after, riding slowly along the dusty road. He dismounted near her garden, tying his horse to a post, and approached with a gentle smile.
"Good morning, Lila," he said. "The garden looks wonderful. You've done a great job."
"Thank you, Wyatt.
I think I'm learning to take care of more than just the garden now." Wyatt nodded, his eyes kind and steady.
That's good to hear. You've grown in ways many people would never expect, and you've shown others that your value is real, even if they couldn't see it before."
As the morning passed, the town seemed to notice Lila's presence more than ever.
People greeted her with smiles, children waved at her in admiration, and neighbors sought her advice for small problems. She felt a quiet pride, not because she wanted attention, but because she realized that her actions and her heart truly mattered.
By midday, a small gathering had formed near the town square. A neighboring rancher had brought a sick calf to town, hoping someone could help save it.
Leela stepped forward without hesitation, remembering the lessons she had learned from Wyatt and the confidence she had built through her own experiences. She carefully examined the calf, cleaned its wounds, and guided others in helping to stabilize it. Wyatt watched from the edge of the crowd, proud but quietly amazed at how far Leela had come. She moved with calm authority, her actions reflecting not only skill but also empathy and wisdom. People who had once doubted her now whispered among themselves, amazed at the courage and knowledge she displayed. After the calf was safe, Lila felt a wave of satisfaction wash over her. She realized that the world was full of challenges, but with determination, compassion, and courage, she could face them all.
And more importantly, she understood that her value was not dependent on anyone else's opinion. It was inherent, a truth that no one could take away.
As the day drew to a close, Wyatt approached Lila again.
"You've come a long way, Lila," he said. "I hope you see what I see in you, a person who is strong, kind, and truly valuable. You've earned respect, not by demanding it, but by being yourself."
She had waited so long to hear someone say those words sincerely. I
think I understand now," she whispered. "I've learned that my worth comes from who I am, not what others say about me." "Exactly."
And now that you know your worth, you can shape your own path. You don't have to follow anyone else's rules or expectations. The world is yours to explore, and your value will always shine through. That evening, the town held a small celebration to honor the efforts of those who had helped with recent challenges, the storm, the sick animals, and other small crises. Lila was invited, and as she entered the town square, she noticed the difference in how people looked at her. Instead of ignoring her or treating her as invisible, they smiled, nodded, and even thanked her for her contributions. Her family, too, stood quietly, realizing that their words could no longer define her.
Her father's stern gaze softened into something almost like pride.
Her brothers no longer looked at her with judgment, but with a new respect that was unspoken but deeply felt.
Even her mother, who had silently endured years of worry for her daughter, gave a warm, approving smile.
During the celebration, Wyatt stood nearby, watching her with a calm sense of satisfaction. He had never been the type to demand recognition for himself, but he took quiet joy in seeing Lila step fully into her worth. He knew that she had grown not because of him, but because she had believed in herself and taken action to prove her own value. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lila found a quiet moment to herself. She walked to the edge of town, looking out over the hills and valleys beyond Willow Creek. The horizon seemed endless, filled with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. Not just free from the judgment of her family, but free to become the person she had always wanted to be. Wyatt approached quietly, standing beside her.
You're thinking about the future, he said softly. Lila nodded.
Yes, I feel like I can finally imagine a life where I'm valued, where I belong, and where I can do things that matter.
You will, Wyatt replied. You already have.
And the world will see it more and more as time goes on.
But remember, the most important recognition is your own.
Never forget that. Lila smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace she had never known. She realized that her journey was only beginning, but now she had the courage, confidence, and self-worth to face it. She had learned that value was not given by others, it was discovered within herself, and she was ready to embrace it fully. Over the following weeks, Lila's life continued to change. She took on new responsibilities in the town, helped organize community projects, and continued to care for her garden and the animals around Willow Creek. Each action, no matter how small, reinforced her confidence and her sense of purpose. Wyatt remained a steady presence in her life, offering guidance and encouragement without overshadowing her achievements. He reminded her gently that her worth had always been there, waiting to be recognized, and that she had the power to shape her own destiny. Her family, though slow to fully understand, began to adjust. They noticed that Lila was no longer afraid to speak her mind, to help others, or to pursue her own goals. They began to treat her with a respect that had once seemed impossible. And though they never fully expressed it in words, Lila could feel that they finally acknowledged her strength and value. One afternoon, as Lila tended to her garden, Wyatt approached her with a thoughtful expression. "You've done well, Lila," he said. "You faced challenges, helped others, and discovered your own worth. The world is brighter because of the person you've become." Lila looked up, her eyes shining. "I couldn't have done it without believing in myself," she said. "And I'm grateful for your support, Wyatt."
You helped me see what I was capable of. Wyatt nodded, smiling warmly. I only helped you notice what was already there.
Des, you've always been more precious than gold, Lila. You just needed to see it yourself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over Willow Creek, Lila felt a sense of completeness she had never known. She had faced judgment, doubt, and challenges, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and confident in her own value. The world no longer seemed limiting, but full of possibilities. She walked back to her home, feeling the gentle breeze on her face, the sounds of the town around her, and the quiet knowledge that she had discovered something far more valuable than anyone could ever take away, her own worth. And so, Lila's story came to a new beginning. She had learned that value could not be given by others, but had to be recognized within. She had faced trials, discovered her strengths, and stepped into a life of respect, courage, and hope. With Wyatt's quiet support and the lessons she had learned, she was ready to face whatever the future held. In the end, Lila smiled, knowing that she was indeed more precious than gold, not because anyone had told her, but because she had finally believed it herself.